be lost like this. And so in that, within that whole story, um, we see that she has this really profound love and care for her son Aeneas, and she just really wants to see him fulfill his destiny. And she says, you know what he's supposed to do. How could you let this happen to him? Jupiter tries to comfort her, and he says that you know he is going to do all of these things, and I'm not going to let any harm befall him. So even though it seems that he's in all of this danger, Jupiter promises that he's going to guide his path. It's not really um, going to be easy. So Venus, somewhat comforted by that, decides that she needs to provide some help to Aeneas. So she goes down and she appears in the form of a huntress. She looks somewhat like Diana, and she she encounters him there in disguise, and starts to starts to talk to him. A couple details here. He recognizes that she doesn't seem human, that she has kind of an air of a goddess about her, but he doesn't know who she is. And she looks like Diana, so that's kind of suspected. But so what does she do? Well, she tells him about the history of Carthage, and what she's doing here is she's planting an idea in his head to seek out Carthage. The thinking here is that he at this point needs a place to regroup. He could use an ally. They have a very similar city or very similar story to the Trojans. Um, they're refugees from Tyre, and so they found this city on the coast, and um, there's a possible alliance there that can form now. But she has this knowledge that they're eventually going to be enemies. She also knows that Carthage is loyal to Juno. So to try to mediate that, in a sense, she decides that Dido is um, going to fall in love with Aeneas, and she tries to arrange that through Cupid. Dido herself had taken this vow not to remarry. Her husband had died. Aeneas's wife had died, by the way. We'll see that flashback later. But Cupid weakens her resolve, and that incites a kind of love for Aeneas, who appears in Carthage. They've been given He'd been given kind of a disguise. He's disguised in the mist, and all of a sudden he's just there, and this very impressive guy comes in, and she notices him, and they take them in. And she wants to know more about him, and she wants to know what happened. And that is where in book two takes us all the way back to Troy, and the story of the Trojan horse. We hear about how it was Ulysses who set all that up, and ended up tricking the Trojans. Now, a couple of details here. Within this story, this part of it is really just kind of a summary of the Iliad. So, the Trojan War, Troy had been under siege for a long time. The Trojan horse was a seemingly it was a gift that that they're given as they give up, and they're not all fooled by this. A Trojan priest saw through it, talked about how they should destroy the horse because it's a trap. The Trojans thought that this would be a bad omen to do that, and so they decide that they have to bring it in. So they bring it in. They're in this kind of celebratory mood. They all get drunk. They fall asleep. The Greeks emerge and are able to ambush the city. And one important detail here: it's not just the Greeks in the horse that take the city. There's only a couple of them there, but the army had been hidden, and they open the gates, and that's what allows them to come in. So the part of the story that our focus shifts to is on Aeneas. So at this point, Hector had been killed. Hector was the big Trojan hero. He died when he fought Achilles. And so he's dead, but he appears in a dream to Aeneas and tells him he needs to leave. He needs to get out of there. So this is before the Greeks start, take the city. And so he wakes up. He sees the city under siege. He, because he's so duty bound, he wants to fight them, but he loses and is left alone. He's separated from the people he was with. He sees the murder of Priam. Priam was the king. His mother Venus appears and steers him back towards his own house. He escapes with his son, Ascanius, his wife Creusa, and his father Anchises. And there's a famous image of him carrying his father out of the city. On the way out, he loses his wife, and he goes back for her. And instead, he runs into her ghost. Now, our focus in the course is on classical mythology, and the nature of ghosts and spirits is something that we can pause on for a minute. Within this text, and this kind of comes from Homer as well, we do see that people encounter dead people that they recognize. So apparently, these ghosts, these shades, are recognizable forms of people that they knew in life, and those shades maintain some of their original identity, essence, memory, whatever. But seemingly, when we get to the underworld, we're going to see that these shades kind of get in this fog mentally where they kind of forget over time who they were. And encounters with the living sometimes will essentially kind of jog their memory. But here, seemingly at that moment of death, her shade, her ghost, is fully cognizant of who she was. She tries to comfort him, and tells him that he's going to be king. He needs to make it to Italy. He will remarry there, and she's essentially okay with that. And so that's really what he says there. Now, so that's book 2, the fall of Troy and the escape. And this is him telling this to Dido. And book 3, which is the last book that we'll cover today, book 3 is about how he talks about the aftermath of that. He takes a fleet of ships away. He had to build this fleet of ships. That's an important detail. and they make a few stops. They stop in Thrace, where he finds some Trojans, um, and they encounter some figures along the way. The Strophides is a place where they encounter a harpy, and the harpy provides a kind of prophecy. She again is trying to direct him uh, towards Italy, and but she says that they will not find it. They will not find Italy until hunger forces them to eat their tables. And okay, so they're going to find Italy, but they're going to struggle essentially. And then one more city that they find, Buthrotum. This was another city that was built in an attempt to replicate Troy. He finds the widow of Hector there, and he meets another prophet who's one of Priam's sons, named Helenus, and he again learns about this destiny that's laid out for him, and so he's told again to seek Italy, where his descendants will prosper. His descendants will rule the world. And Helenus tells him to find more about this. He needs to go consult the Sibyl in Cumae, and that actually is my background image. That's the Sibyl who's going to take him to the underworld. So what this is, this journey. Book one gives this kind of simplified account of it, that they're out at sea, their journey is disrupted, and they end up in Africa. This fills in the gaps of how he got there. And at every single stop, it's reinforced to him that he needs to go to Italy. So his dead wife told him that. This harpy told him that. And there have been all these attempts by different Trojans to set up a new Troy, a new city, and all of those efforts have failed. And so it's going to be him. It falls to him to do that. He's the one who's going to be successful, but he's going to struggle first. So when he leaves Buthrotum and makes his way around the eastern tip of Italy, they're caught in the whirlpool of Charybdis, and we've talked about that. We talked about that before, and so Charybdis was cursed and transformed into this monster that swallows ships in the sea. And so what happens there is they don't get caught in the whirlpool, but the whirlpool itself kind of captures them and flings them outward, kind of like how gravity works with like asteroids or something. So like gravity's gets too close to a planet, it's either gonna bring it into the planet, or it's gonna use it to propel it and like fling it outward. And so they're flung outward, and they end up in the land of Cyclops, which familiar from the Odyssey, and they take refuge there. And this they hear about the story of Ulysses' men there who had escaped the cave of Polyphemus. They narrowly escape him as well. It is at this point that Aeneas's father dies during the journey, and when he leaves that island, that is where he gets lost again, and that's how he ends up in Carthage. So that's where we get to book one. and then he ends his account of his wanderings to Dido. Now, book 4 is going to be all about how Dido falls in love with Aeneas, how that is doomed, and what happens to her is going to be really instrumental, both to the story and to Roman history. And so on Thursday, I'm going to take us from book 4. I'm going to summarize book 4 and 5, but what I want you to read, all of, is book 6. So read all of book 6, and we're going to talk about that next time. And that's going to be the book that sets up our discussion of Dante's Inferno. So the only graded assignment this week is going to be that quiz over the Aeneid, and then I'm going to talk us through the text next time, and we'll get up through book 6. I am going to summarize the rest of the Aeneid, but I'm not assigning you to necessarily read that. I think that it's a good read. It's a classic text, and I would recommend it. But for our course focus, we're going to center our attention on book 6, and we're going to use that as a bridge to Dante's Inferno, which we'll cover next. Okay, so that is going to conclude our session today. I did record this. I missed out on the first part of the lecture before it started recording, but most of it's here, and so I'll get this posted to the course. If you do have any questions or anything, let me know. The only graded assignment due this week, as I mentioned, is the quiz over the Aeneid, and then we'll talk a bit more about what we're going to do for some in-class activities going forward. But it was good to see you all, to talk to you again, and I will see you all again on Thursday. And I'll go ahead and I'll stick around for just a couple minutes if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, just log in at the same time, and I will see you then. Thank you.